Hello there friends and welcome. For today's BG3 guide we have a very fun build, a Wild Magic Barbarian. This isn't actually a spellcasting barbarian, amusingly enough, rather, whenever you rage you will always generate automatically a Wild Surge magic effect, which thankfully will always be beneficial to either your character or even your whole party. For fun effects such as higher damage, higher armor class, some crowd control and even life steal as area of effect. You even get the ability to restore quite a lot of spell slots of different levels for your spellcasting party members. And lastly, by virtue of still retaining access to all of the extremely powerful basic barbarian class features like rage and reckless attacks, your character will be a powerhouse even if you don't care for the wild magic effects. But that's part of the fun of the build, right? So without further ado, let us get started into our Wild Magic Barbarian build, first with character creation. When it comes to race, well, it's the classic choices for melee characters: Wood Elf or Wood Half Elf for higher movement, Half Orc if you want tasty criticals, but it takes a while until you can really get high critical chance, Githyanki for higher skills, or amusingly enough, gnomes do make amazing barbarians because they can tank enemy crowd control effects quite well, due to having advantage on all mental saving throws. After all, as far as actually tanking physical and ranged attacks, Barbarian does that just fine through their Rage feature, as early as level 1 of course, because it does provide you with resistance that's half damage taken against all physical damage. Half Orc is I think the most fitting thematically anyways. For class of course you want Barbarian, and to be fair it is one of the strongest classes early. Like I said, you have Rage, at the second level you have free advantage on all attacks, and it only gets better from there. For stats, ideally a focus into strength at first, so start with 17 by assigning a +2, and then I would also go with dexterity as your second most important stat. 16 at character creation should be good enough. Barbarians do get bonuses to armor class from both dexterity and constitution it stacks, but dexterity just offers more, especially for higher initiative. Then dump charisma and intelligence for 14 constitution, you're already quite tanky anyways just by virtue of your rage alone, and then just 10 wisdom as usual, just so you don't have a penalty on wisdom saving throws, as it is targeted by most enemies' crowd control effects. For skills, definitely athletics because of our high strength and to prevent you from being pushed all around the map. And the other one is really up to you. Might as well go with perception or survival. And for the background, anything that further enhances the skills you want. Ideally guild art is not that fitting for a barbarian I suppose, but having insight is really good. The same for persuasion, or you might just go with soldier, more fitting as you have intimidation and also athletics. And of course pick another skill as proficiency because you already have athletics for free. This isn't exactly a high skill characters, I'm afraid. Barbarians are mostly all about rip and tear, if you know what I mean. At the second level, like any barbarian, you'll have the reckless attack feature, amazing because you won't have to rely on gear for advantage. And level 3 is when we can of course pick our subclass, Wild Magic. As I mentioned before, whenever you rage, you'll also always generate a beneficial Wild Magic effect. And you'll get the Magic Awareness action that lets you add your proficiency bonus to the saving throws against spells of all nearby allies. Actually it also works for enemies, so be careful with that. Now it does cost a bonus action, which can clash with your rage use at least for the first turn of battle. For level 4 and our first feat, we 100% want Great Weapon Master, not only for the huge damage increase, even the extra attack also helps for later battle turns, because for the first one you just want to rage, as I mentioned before. And of course, the fact you have the reckless attack feature so early means you can also easily overcome the attack penalty, especially when you apply a few buffs. Level 5 is when we get the classic second attack per each action, and I would rather still remain a pure barbarian for a few levels because some of the class features we'll get now are still rather good. Both for Wild Magic and normal Barbarian progression. You'll get the Bolstering Magic Boon feature, which actually increases the attack rolls or ability checks of allies, but costs an action. Ideally you want to cast this out of battle, right, because it lasts 10 turns. And it does stack with Blast, by the way. But most importantly is when you get the rather unique ability of restoring spell slots to allies. First with level 1 and also second level spells. These actually have separate uses, so you can use all of them. And while it might not seem like much, in Baldur's Gate 3, because spell difficulty class doesn't scale with spell level, even early game spells that are powerful can remain quite good even until late game. For example, Fairy Fire. And I imagine chances are you are going with a spellcaster, party member, at the very least a cleric or a wizard or sorcerer. Level 7 is when we get the Feral Instinct Barbarian feature, which is amazing because it increases your initiative. Which means you won't have to get the alert feat, you won't have the space for it, I'm afraid. Level 8 means another feat, and you have a few options here. You can, for example, go ability improvement and strength. I'd rather not, because you won't be able to get another feat, unless you remain a pure barbarian. And later, at around level 10, you can just get gloves that set your strength to 23 anyways. Alert, of course, is always a possibility, but like I said, you already have a feature that grants you +3 to initiative. My preferred pick is Savage Attacker. You can always stack loads of extra damage on any melee character, and this can really help increase your average damage. Level 9 will be our last Wild Magic Barbarian level, because it's when we get Brutal Critical, amazing for extra damage just like Savage Attacks, and this does stack with the half-orc ratio, by the way, plus the ability to restore even level 3 spells lost, which of course matters because, well, they are some of the best spells in the game, like Haste, and the crowd control ones, such as Hypnotic Pattern or Glyph of Warding, even Slow. While you could remain a Wild Magic Barbarian for the level 10 feature Unstable Backlash, it is rather poor. While in Rage, when you take damage or fail a saving throw, you trigger another Wild Magic effect that well replaces the current one, and for some of them, like extra damage or extra armor class, there's not much of a point in replacing. Plus it does require you to take damage or fail a saving throw, and at this point, because of your high initiative, and well the fact you have other party members, if they are properly built, you're just destroying everything before they can do much. So I'd rather multi-class now, with the classic fighter of course, because it provides a lot of bang for your buck, if you know what I mean. For fighting style, great weapon fighting for even more damage. Level 11 means Action Surge, also amazing for any build. And at long last for level 12, the Champion subclass for higher critical chance, especially because at this point, well, you have all the critical boosting gear your heart desires, as you'll be at Act 3. Alright, now let us cover gear for our Wild Magic Barbarian. For the helmet slot, as always early on, you absolutely want the Haste Helm for higher movement speed. For the second act, it's the same choices as well, either Dark Justiciar or the Covert Cowl for higher criticals. Just remember you have to be away from light, so don't cast light on a nearby character, like a tank. But Act 3 is where the really powerful helmets are. Starting of course with Saravog's Horn Helmet if you want higher critical range, which will stack with everything else, including our fighter subclass, champion, that is. Or for something quite thematic to barbarians, well, we have the Horns of the Berserker, which does increase your damage. Just remember you have to take damage first, even 1 damage is enough. But you can always have a party member punch you before battle and so on. The Helmet of Grit can also work, for example if you want to, well, in the first turn of battle, combine both a rage use with the bonus action for an extra attack with Great Weapon Master. It's just that the limitation of 50% hit points, well, I find it very annoying. Unlike the Horns of the Berserker, which are much easier to proc. Cloaks don't really matter for this build, but you might as well use the Cloak of Displacement, unless you want to save it for a tank. For armor, anything goes up to medium armor. Do not go with heavy armors, because they will block you from activating Rage. I say the medium variant of the Adamantine armor would be the best choice early. I have the heavy one here because you can only get one, as it will reduce damage taken. But since we have good enough initiative, eventually you can also go with low AC armors. After all, who cares about AC if you're just destroying enemies before they can attack you, such as the Mighty Cloth for higher strength, even the Enraging Heart Garb for higher constitution. But ultimately something really good is the Bone Spike Garb, as you get a huge amount of temporary HP when raging, and it also reduces incoming damage, which has amazing synergy with Rage, by the way, as you get physical resistance from it for even less damage. For gloves, there's nothing important for Act 1, especially as you do not need to rely on the Growling Underdog gloves at all, by virtue of having the Reckless Attack feature as a Barbarian for free advantage on all hits. For the second chapter, however, Dark Justiciar Gauntlets as always for higher damage on hit. And ultimately, Act 3 wise you can upgrade it into Hell Dusk, also for higher damage, but my preferred pick for this build would be the Giant Strength Gloves that set your strength to 23. And of course, by the point you get them, you can respec out of strength and put the points into something else like Dexterity or Constitution. Dexterity would be better for higher initiative and more AC. And you can of course then equip the medium armors for the highest AC like the Armor of Agility. Boots don't matter much, just the Disintegrating Nightwalkers as usual. For amulets, well, for most of the game you absolutely want Broodmother's Revenge for extra damage on hit as always, but later during Act 3 you might as well go with the Amulet of Greater Health, to set your Constitution to 23, which of course has better synergy with Barbarian, because they do get, well, higher AC from having a high Constitution score. That stacks with Dexterity. As far as the rings is the classic package for extra damage, Caustic Band found as early as Act 1, and the Callous Glow Ring for the second Act plus. Just like with the gloves of the Growling Underdog, save the risky ring for someone else because you already have reckless attacks. Now let us cover weapons and consumables. You can of course always start with the Everburn Blade that you get from the prologue, but if you didn't get it, don't worry because there is a much better weapon choice for Act 1 anyways, which is Jorgoral's Great Sword as usual for two-handers. It not only has the normal cleave ability which lets you hit multiple enemies per attack, but most importantly a special cleave variant called Colossal Onslaught, that lets you hit enemies in a huge line. It's such a good weapon that I would remain with it for the entirety of Chapter 1 and also the second chapter. For Act 3, however, this is when you absolutely want to upgrade it into the ultimate strength-based great weapon in the game, Balduran's Giant Slayer, which of course doubles your strength modifier to damage, which is why we went with the giant gloves. As I mentioned before, we didn't really have the space to increase our strength when leveling up, because we only got 2 feats. Anyways, it's an amazing weapon, be sure to activate your giant form ability before battle. It's once per short rest, and quite powerful at what it does. And for ranged weapons, well, as always for Act 3, Deadshot for higher critical range. After all, you have Saravok's Helm, this, plus the Fighter subclass and the Reckless Attack feature for advantage, which also increases your criticals. But for the first act, as usual, just the Bow of Awareness for higher initiative to make up for the fact, while you do get an ability to increase your initiative by +3, it comes later, so earlier the bow can help. But since you have decent dexterity with this build, if you want a ranged alternative, the Titan String Bow, also found as early as Act 1, can be quite good, because it lets you apply both your dexterity and also strength modifier on damage. And for consumables, as always, just the Elixir of Bloodlust. An extra action means, of course, 2 extra attacks with this build per turn, because it does last until long rest. Well, alright friends, so this was it for my Wild Magic Barbarian guide. If you found it useful, as always, please remember to like and subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I truly appreciate your support. Thank you for watching, and see you next time, friends.